This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome back to Live Talk with Dr. B. Hill. We are going to have our continued guests today, Dr. Smith and Travis today. So, Dr. B,
Thank
your
you so
mic is
much. I
off.
really appreciate it, Chrissy. And I'll try to remember to turn on my speaker there. Hello, Dr. Smith. I know we
Dr.
have
B.
Travis coming as well. There he is. Hi, Travis. Well, I
Hello, Dr. B.
believe we ended yesterday on a great portion where we were going to pick up from. Is that correct?
Yes, it is,
Yes,
Dr. B.
Dr. B.
All right, so I am going to leave and let the two of you converse, and I may come back in maybe with a picture or two. Bye.
I know what you're up to, Dr. B. You just try to fluster me by showing me pictures of Dr. Nora Volkow, the director of NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, and you know that just a picture of her is my trigger, and you're trying to throw me off my game. But I'm ready for you, Dr. B. Travis, how are you today?
Good, Dr. Smith. How about yourself?
Really looking forward to jumping back in this dialogue we had because, Travis, you raised a very interesting point, and it's a point I don't have clarity in my head, and yet, Travis, you and I are going to be in a position where we need to have clarity because, quite honestly, people are going to be looking to us for leadership. And the question that you pose, Travis, is really twofold. Okay, we looked at a lot of scientific evidence. We've looked at tons of scientific evidence. There's no doubt about science, but the providers, at least I have put forth, have been suffering from what is called cognitive bias. But yet, even if cognitive bias, a belief in something that's not real, a belief in something despite evidence to the contrary, a belief in something even when you're presented with evidence to the contrary. And we talked about the explosion of the Challenger space shuttle in 1986 and the failure of the O-rings on the booster tanks and how cognitive bias is believed to have played a role and why nobody stepped forward and said, hey, you launch that rocket, it's going to blow up. Um, Although after the fact, a whole bunch of people said, yeah, I knew it was going to blow up. But anyway, but the providers and the healthcare professionals, they have gone through a training process. They have gone through a process where they've been trained. So for them to all believe the same thing really wouldn't be a brainwashing, it would be a cognitive bias. But then it raises the question, if the patients, since they have not gone through a training process, okay, they've only gone through a process of diagnosis and treatment, have the patients been brainwashed? And Travis, I want you to walk me through again the process that you went through. And Travis, it kind of sounded like to me that they tried to brainwash you, but you didn't allow it to happen.
Well, I couldn't, I don't know how to explain it unless you were there, but it's when I first wanted to get help, before I reached out to the provider that I reached out to, because I knew I could trust them, and I went to them afterwards. But I went to a clinic, and well, you could say a detox type place or whatever you want to call it, but it was like an outpatient type deal. Because I had to work, and I have kids, and I couldn't afford to be somewhere for 30 days. I just couldn't do that. So I was trying to find other means of doing what I needed to do. And the first thing they told me was, the first step to making it into recovery is you need to admit to yourself that you're a drug addict, and admit to yourself that mentally something's wrong with you. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't believe that I didn't believe I was a drug addict back then, but I didn't know, that's what everybody was saying. So, like you said, I mean, if everybody's saying it, in my mind, I was like, I guess it's true, but for some reason, I just don't feel comfortable doing this. So I wasn't willing to say that I was a drug addict and that something was mentally wrong with me, because I wasn't out running the streets taking all these different street drugs. That's not what I was doing. I had known, I knew what had happened to me. I ended up in the hospital. I was going through surgeries. I got real bad sick, and then, they put me on opioids. And then before I knew it, it got out of hand. And that's what I kept telling them. And they were like, no, you're a drug addict. And I'm like, okay. And that's when I stopped going there, and I reached out to the person I thought I could trust, and I was right.
Do you feel there are some people out there who could have gone through a similar process that weren't as strong as you were in their ability to have the self-confidence and confidence in themselves to resist the belief that they were a drug addict? And it raises the question, have do they meet the criteria for someone who has been brainwashed? Have these people been brainwashed, or is that something that each individual is going to have to conclude for themselves, whether or not they have been brainwashed?
I think that, that's a hard question to answer, really. I mean, for me, it was an individual choice. It was, I kind of like, I did go to a group therapy there one time, and I was kind of looking around the room, and I was just, I was thinking to myself, I'm not comfortable here. Like, I don't feel like I fit in here. I don't feel like this is what is going on in my life right now. Like, I understand that I'm on opioids and I no longer want to take those, but, and I know it's getting out of hand, but I always felt like there was a bigger reason for that. I always felt like it was, and I don't mean to say this bad, but at that time, that's before I knew about the DNA testing, I almost was mad at my doctor, because I'm like, man, why the heck did he, put me on this crap? Like, look what's happened in my life. Like, why did he, I was trying to blame them in my mind at first, until I got the DNA testing done, and I realized, wow, these people didn't even know about this. They had no clue about this. So this is what, like, it was like a light bulb, like I told you earlier. It was like a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, eureka. I was like, this is what I've been looking for. This all makes sense. The science is here, the blood work is here, and the explanation is here. And it just everything lined up in a row, and I was like, this is what's been going on. Like, this makes sense to me. I'm a common sense type person. So if it doesn't make sense to me, like common sense wise, then I'm going to have a hard time believing it. And I just didn't feel like I fit in with the criteria of a drug addict, and that mentally something was wrong with me. I don't know if it was pride. I don't know what it was, but I just felt like I could not do that. I could not, as a person, I could not sit there and say I'm this. And yes, mentally something's wrong with me, because I didn't feel that way. I mean, I knew I wanted to get off the opioids, and I knew it was out of control, but I just felt there was always a bigger reason why. And when I found this Smith test, it proved me right. There was a bigger reason why.
Christy, when you get a chance, let's pull up those two DNA slides, DNA slide number 1, DNA slide number 2. And Travis, what we're going to do here is we're going to pull up the results of your DNA test. And Travis, the question is, did if 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 in your mind you're struggling to figure out what's going on, and if in your mind you're struggling to figure out if they're trying to brainwash you or they're right, what role did taking this test have to play in the conclusions that you finally came to? In other words, you've got a certain way of thinking today. Did this DNA test play a role in, well, first off, let's ask you, what do you believe today? And then secondly, let's ask you if the DNA test played a role in getting you to that place.
Sure, I'll answer that, but I also want to make one point out. Another reason why I was hard on believing what they were telling me is because they were saying to me that I was taking these pills to get high, and I knew for a fact that I wasn't even getting high off of them. I was just not being sick. Like, that's one of the things that really rubbed me the wrong way, because I even told these people that. I was like, sir, man, like, whoever I was talking to, I was like, I don't get high off these. I really don't. And they would sit there and look at me like I was crazy and like I'm lying. And I'm like, I do not get high. Like, I don't. I'm keeping myself normal. Like every day I take these, I'm only maintaining normalcy. Like I'm not getting high. I'm just normal. I'm able to be normal that day. If I don't take them, then I am very, very ill. And when I do take them, I'm normal again. And they just didn't want to believe that. But sorry, can you ask me your question one more time?
And by the way, Travis, that was an excellent point, and I think that point is going to be something a lot of people are going to want to hear you say. And I got to be honest, I've never been in your shoes in that position, so it's hard for me to imagine what that's like. But here's these people telling you, on one hand, oh, Travis, you're a drug addict and you have to admit you're a drug addict. And on the other hand, they're telling you, oh, and Travis, you're just taking opioids to get high. And you're sitting there thinking, that's not true. And so I see what you're saying. If that part isn't true, then what else are they saying is not true? I see
Yeah,
your
that
point.
was my
So,
whole point by not really going with that flow, you could say, is because I kept trying to tell them that, and this is before I knew anything about the Smith test, before I found out anything about it. This is a long time before that. And I told a lot of the people that worked at that facility, I said, listen, what you're saying here is really not true. Like, I wasn't taking them to get high. I just wasn't. Every
did
day was a
anybody?
battle to. No one believed me. No one agreed with me.
What
Matter
about
of fact, I think,
what about the other
what was that?
patients? What about the other
Now,
patients?
when we were in the last group I went to, because I only went to 2 groups and I never went back, there was people that said the same thing. They were like, I agree with him. Everybody who was on, anyone who was on opioids or who had been on opioids agreed with what I was saying. They said he's telling the truth, like, but they didn't want to. They didn't want to hear it. They were like, no, listen, guys, you guys are drug addicts. You guys were getting high off of it, and they were like, listen, seriously. After a while, you're just trying not to get sick, but they didn't want to hear it.
You know what you ran into? Cognitive bias.
Yeah, yeah,
It's pretty strong, isn't it?
yes, sir.
They weren't going to admit that you were right, were they?
No, sir, they weren't.
No, you could have sat there all day for a year and they were not going to admit that you were right. Travis, thank you. You just described your encounter with cognitive bias. You can't get past it.
No, you can't.
So we're looking here at the results of the DNA test of several people. The top 5 are people who are opioid naive, people who've never really taken opioids, and then from number 6 all the way down are people who are opioid dependent. And we tried to color code this to make it very easy for people to look at and see the difference. And Travis, if I'm not mistaken, you're number 7031 there. Um,
Yep.
yep. And uh, what's amazing about this is, let's be honest about this. The differences between the two are not that great. Okay, they're just a couple of degrees, a couple of percentages. That's how poisonous methylation is. Okay, the difference between opioid naive and opioid dependency is only just a few percentage points. That's how dangerous the opioid actually is. It is that poisonous. And you can see the numbers right there. And while the differences may not appear to be that great, in the scientific sense, when you compare them, they were statistically significant. Now, what that means is this science is real. Okay, this isn't opinion. This isn't uh, 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 some pet theory.
A theory, yeah.
Right, you're looking at real live science, and what makes the difference is statistical significance. Now, when you come to the brain disease model of addiction, you don't find any statistical significance. When you begin to wander into onto the landscape of the psychiatrist and the addiction specialist, you don't find this type of science. Okay, you come onto our landscape, this is all we rely upon. We are people of science. we rely upon showing the science and let the science speak for itself. And Travis, you can see right there, your DNA is not the same as the top 5. There is a difference, and it is a statistically significant difference.
Mm-hmm.
So, Christy, when you get a chance, we'll go to the second slide. I think the second slide of the DNA is a little easier to understand. And now, Travis, what we've done here, and I think this is one of the most important slides that we can show. What we've done here is we've laid out the gene like we were laying it out on a table. All right, there's the gene spread out in front of you, the OPRM1 gene, the gene that encodes and creates the opioid receptor. This is the gene that makes the main opioid receptor. Okay, and that main opioid receptor is used all over the body. It is old, it is ancient, it is not something you want to fool around with. And as we're beginning to understand, it's involved in maintaining the balance and homeostasis among the organ systems in the body. And Travis, what we're looking at there is, and as you can see, we've laid out the damage on the gene itself. The areas in blue are opioid naive people, people who have never really taken opioids. The columns in red right next to them, those are the opioid dependent people. And everywhere that the red column is bigger than the blue column, that is an area that may have and probably has undergone what is called gene silencing. In other words, the methylation turns off the area of the gene where the methylation occurs. Just like it doesn't take a whole lot of energy to turn off a light switch, it doesn't take a whole lot of methylation to turn off an area of a gene. So Travis, that's your DNA right there. You're looking at the areas in your body that have been permanently turned off. And as we begin the end of this week and moving into next week, having people who've never heard of us, never heard of a DNA test, never heard of methylation, and they're looking at that picture right there. And Travis, you've got to be clear in your mind what you want to tell that person about that picture when they're looking at it right there. So what are your thoughts on that picture, Travis?
My thoughts on the picture of my DNA.
Yes.
I mean, as you can tell, where all the red is, that's where it's been silenced. It's just you can clearly show that my DNA is forever changed. I mean, it's the chart right here speaks for itself.
All right, let's start with that statement right there. When you look at your results, you're understanding that your DNA has been forever changed. And I know you and I have talked about this before, and when you think about that and you think about what the pharmaceutical industry has done to you, it is going to create an anger within you. Now we're going to have people seeing us for the first time, hearing us for the first time. This will be the very first time they've ever heard about DNA damage. This will be the very first time they've ever seen any scientific evidence for it. We've got to be prepared to help these people through what's going to be a very painful process for them. They didn't come to our show angry at the pharmaceutical industry, okay, because they have been brainwashed and convinced that they were a drug addict. Now they're looking at the first time that what happened to them was done to them by the pharmaceutical industry without their knowledge, without their permission, and without their consent. And they're going to have an emotional reaction to that, just like you did, Travis. And they're going to be looking to you for the words to help them put this into perspective, to absorb this knowledge.
Right.
So when if you were talking to someone that's learning this for the first time and knowing what you went through with the process, walk them through it. And by the way, let them know anger is normal.
I would use your explanation on the house. That's what made it click for me. Where you said my DNA is like a house. This graph that we're looking at right here is like a house. You go inside of the breaker box, and someone messes with all your breakers, your house is not going to function properly. That's basically exactly what's happened here with my DNA. The opioids have went inside of my DNA, and it's messed all my breakers up, and now my body, we don't know what's going to happen now. But now my DNA is all out of whack. So that's basically how I would explain it. That's how you explained it to me, and it clicked in my mind. So that's basically in a nutshell what I would say. That's not all I would say, but
Picture in your mind, create a picture in your mind of what a opioid receptor looks like. A normal opioid receptor. It has to bind to and grab onto the opioid molecule when it goes floating by in the blood system. It's got to grab onto that opioid molecule, but it also does a lot of other processes as a receptor. So picture in your mind what a normal receptor looks like. I have a picture in my mind of like a golf tee with the top of the tee kind of looking like a U. And then picture in your mind what an abnormal opioid receptor looks like. In other words, when you turn off little areas of the DNA, what you're actually doing is turning off little parts
of my
that
body.
would normally built into the receptor, but you turned them off. So it's like a car that comes out of a factory, but instead of having 4 doors and 4 wheels, it's got 2 doors and 1 wheel, and maybe not a steering wheel, because those areas in the factory line got turned off. That receptor is a protein. It's a sequence of building blocks put together. And when you turn off little bits and pieces, you're turning off little areas of the building blocks. So if you were supposed to have 37 building blocks, you only end up with 29. And it's an abnormal receptor. It's not able to function normally. Now, why that results in a loss of control of the organs, why that results in a loss of control of the nerves going to the organs, why that gets better when you take an opioid or take buprenorphine, nobody has a clue because no research has been done on it. I think all we could say is that, wow, you start turning off this many areas of the DNA, and chances are you're not going to get a normal opioid receptor. That's about all I think we can say. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So whatever your opioid receptors looked like before in your body, before you took opioids and got the DNA damage and got the changes in the opioid receptor, that is not what your opioid receptor looks like right now. And one of the things that I'm hoping for in the not too distant future is that we get some images of a normal opioid receptor compared to the opioid receptor of someone who has suffered the DNA damage. What exactly happened? Do they look the same? Do they look differently? Why do they behave differently? Okay, Travis, if I stop taking opioids, I don't get sick. When you stop taking opioids, you get sick and your body loses control of your internal organs. Why?
I'd actually like to know why, but I mean, like you said, we haven't had the research yet, but and I don't know if it would be safe to even have that research. I don't know how safe someone would be to do that research, but it's something that I feel it needs to be done because we need to know what's going to happen. We need to know what could happen. We need to know this. We need to know it. Like I feel as a person who was on opioids, I want to know what's going to happen or what could happen.
And Travis, beginning the end of this week and as we move into next week, there are going to be people, at first there'll be a small number, but then it will grow. There are going to be people who are tuning into us every day that have no earthly clue what in the world we are talking about. We got their attention. Oh, we got their attention because they tuned into the show. They've heard that now some people may not have opioid addiction. They may have DNA damage, and they're going to be looking to us for guidance and answers. I think we need to be consistent in that everybody eventually needs to do a DNA test. That's a given. Everybody needs to eventually do a DNA test. We understand right now it's a cost out of pocket and it's expensive, but if you can, go ahead and get the DNA test done and have the proof. If the question is, were you an opioid addict? Did you have a mental disease? Or was your body damaged without your knowledge or permission by a greedy pharmaceutical industry? We can get you an answer.
And once they get their catecholamines and they get their graft back with their DNA and they see what it looks like, it's going to help a lot of people realize what's going on, because like I told you, once I saw the results, it all made sense. It just 100% without a shadow of a doubt, I believe in this more than anything I ever have, because it's science. And not only that, it's the truth. And I believe in the truth.
Travis, does it make sense that when you attempt opioid abstinence and you get sick, does it make sense that you're not really losing control of the organ, you're losing control of the nerves that control the organ? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. And you're losing control of all the nerves that control the organs, so therefore the organs begin to behave in a bizarre fashion. The hair follicles stand up, you begin pouring sweat, your eyes water, your nose runs, you start yawning, your gut acts up, your heart starts pounding. And if you lose control of those organs, that's distressing. But if you lose control of your adrenal gland, that thing will kill you. That thing will kill you. And one of the things we're going to be running into, Travis, is, and it's not anything that you and I have to talk about, you've personally seen how buprenorphine helped all of that.
Well, I know how it helped all of that.
A lot of people are not on buprenorphine. A lot of people are not on buprenorphine. And that raises a question whether or not they're at risk of some catastrophic event. We don't know.
I think buprenorphine was a big role in my life being saved. I mean, there was a lot more at work than just that, but that was one of the biggest factors is me getting on buprenorphine.
But
It
there are
saved my
people
life.
who have done it without buprenorphine. They have suffered through it.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you read about them long term, even those who suffered through it, they don't do so well. They will
No, they
finally
don't. They
back to opioids.
Yes, they usually relapse, and then normally what happens is once they relapse the first couple of times, it's usually the first time once they get clean, they suffer through it like you're saying, and I know people that this has happened to. They went to rehab, they got out, they had one bad day, they relapsed, boom, they're dead. They die of an overdose because they don't realize that their body's not immune to the same amount of opioids they were using prior to getting clean and fighting through it and getting off. So once they use too much and they end up killing themselves.
Dr. B's back. Dr. B
Your
doesn't really
microphone's off, Dr. B.
her microphone's off, which is what we'd like to do with Dr. Volkow.
I should end it with her picture for you.
No, I'm having a good day, Dr. B.
Well, I want to thank both of you very much for coming, and I guess we'll see you all on. Well, actually, Dr. Smith is not going to be with us on Wednesday, so it will be Travis, Chrissy, and myself, and we're going to have a good time talking about what's going on. Thank you,
Thank you
Chrissy.
so much. Thank you so much for joining us today, and every Monday through Thursday at 12:30 to 1. And thank you for that valuable information, Dr. Smith, Travis, and y'all have a great day.
You're welcome.